very good day to everyone. I nearly said good afternoon, but you may not be in the same part of the world as me for our lunchtime seminar in the UK. I'm Thomas Lancaster. I'm going to be leading or chairing this group of people who hopefully you can see on your screen, who are going to be talking about contract cheating. And we've called this a workshop, but really it's going to be more of a panel because there's so many great interesting points that people have got to feed into the developments that we're all doing. And we've gained quite a few extra people in our panelist mode as well this afternoon, which is good. But officially our panelists are going to be Irene, Sonja, Zeenath and Deirdre. I'm going to let them introduce themselves in a few minutes, but what we decided would be useful, I can see in the chat as well, that people are asking for, would just be to very briefly talk about what contract cheating is. So I want to say from my point of view, it's an area that I know very well and very passionate about because it's an area I've been working on for 15 years ago. It's nearly 15 years to the day when I gave the first presentation on contract cheating with my colleague, the late Robert Clark there. But I wanted to try and see what I can say in 5 minutes for an area where we could all talk about for 5 hours or possibly 5 days. People often ask me what contract cheating is. So we have a working group. The people you see here today are all members of our Addressing Contract Cheating working group as part of ENAI. And the definition we've come up with from the working group is the one you can see on the screen. Contract cheating is a form of academic misconduct when a person uses an undeclared and/or unauthorized third party to assist them to produce work for academic credit or progression, whether or not payment or other favor is involved. Reading it out aloud, I realize I wish it had been 2 sentences so I could take a breath, but that's the definition we have. And just to break that down a bit, first of all, this idea that it is academic misconduct. A student is getting an advantage they don't deserve. We want to have ways to address that in how we teach, how we assess, how we detect this, and various other mechanisms there through our procedures and through our policies, which is one of the main purposes of our panel this afternoon. The student is using an undeclared and/or unauthorized third party. So what we mean by this is the person who is doing the work, which the student is claiming to have done or handing in, is not the student. So it could be someone that they know, it could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be somebody from a commercial service, but it is somebody other than the student who is not expected to be doing this work. In other words, we are, as academics, we are going to be assessing the wrong person. As part of the definition, we've determined that this is when this person is involved in helping the student to produce work for academic credit or progression. There are some gray areas in all of these definitions. It's hard to get them exactly right, but what we're determining here is the student is trying to get credits they don't deserve, they're trying to get an advantage they don't deserve, they're trying to get potentially a degree or another qualification which they shouldn't get, because although somebody is very good at this work, it isn't the student themselves. And finally, we've brought in this idea that there may or may not be payment involved there or other favors. We've used the word favors because people don't always pay in forms of cash. Sometimes people just say, do my work and I'll cook you a nice hot dinner. These things are possible. We see these requests on social media. But sometimes it can just be a family member who determines that we don't want our son or daughter to fail, so we will do the work for them to make sure they pass this piece of coursework. So that really is a very high level definition of contract cheating. There's all kinds of intricacies we could talk about for a long time here, and we could debate this. It's imperfect, like so many definitions are, but it's the official one that ENAI uses for this purpose. And incidentally, you may also know of this term through other words. Some people may think of this in terms of the word outsourcing. Some people may think of this in terms of the word ghostwriting. They're similar terms, but Contract cheating doesn't just necessarily involve written work. It could involve other types of work other than ghostwriting. So it could be computer source code. I'm a computer scientist. It could be writing music notes. It could be doing artwork. It could be preparing presentation slides. So do students know about this? Well, this is an example of the kind of advert a student can see on a very well-known site which specializes in doing work for students. It has been quite widely covered in the news in the UK, but it promotes itself heavily. And this, for instance, is they say, Professor Keating could do your work. They've completed 495 projects with a 98% success rate, and they've helped 374 different students. Now, we can't verify these numbers because there's no reason they couldn't be made up, but quite often, if you look inside how these sites operate, there is inside a database and you can trace a lot of this information back there. But the kind of text being used here is that you're hiring a professional writer, somebody who's completed dozens of tasks. 495 pieces of work is an incredible number to have done since 2020, when we think how long we want a student to complete a piece of work. They're saying they'll work on your timeline, regardless of where you live in the world, and encouraging you to sign up with them. This is just one example. Students see these adverts all the time. They appear in their inbox. They appear pinned up on lampposts. They're very visible. They appear on social media, and companies are actively trying to make money by doing work for students. So I want to conclude this very brief introduction just by saying we're talking about a problem that students know about. They see these adverts, they can access contract cheating sites, they can access them in different formats. We are concerned about contract cheating because a student is missing out on learning. They're putting themselves at a disadvantage because they miss out on learning an early task in their course. How do they do the follow-up tasks? And so they become dependent on cheating again and again and again. And as part of this whole process, we'll come to the idea of they're also putting themselves at risk because there are some slightly dishonest businesses who are offering contract cheating services. They have the student information. They can choose to expose the students or to blackmail them. I'm interested in this area to protect students. I want my students to do well. But it's also an area in which our research is really only just starting to develop. There are lots of opportunities to get involved in research in this area and help to improve practice. And finally, we have this panel here today focusing on contract cheating in general, but also particularly thinking about the policies we need to support us in our institutions, in our individual courses, to help us to address contract cheating, to support the honest students, to stop the students who don't deserve it from getting an unfair advantage over their peers. So that is my 5 minutes or so, just to hopefully bring us all up to speed before I turn this session over to our, let's say, esteemed panel here. We're really grateful to have 6 people involved. So that's my 5 minutes. Sonja, I note the comment. Unfortunately, I did not have that at the front of my screen at the time there. But to do 5 minutes, which was all I was given on contract cheating, is incredibly tough. But you should all, as you watch this, hopefully pick up a flavor as we go through the session from this. So do feel free to share your comments. We've discussed as a group some questions which the panelists are going to address, but hopefully we'll have time to take the ideas of everyone in the audience in as well. At that point, I'd like to introduce our panel, and they're all just going to say a little bit about themselves and their role here. And we'll start off, I think, please, with Irene.
Thanks, Thomas, and welcome everybody to the workshop, and welcome also to my fellow panelists. I know quite a lot of you, but there are some names in the list I've not come across before. So my name is Irene Glendinning, and I'm an associate lecturer at Coventry University in the UK. I've been involved in research into academic integrity, plagiarism, and related issues, particularly focusing on policies for about 10 years, so not quite as long as Thomas. And my role in the institution where I work in the Office of Teaching and Learning, but I'm a lapsed computer scientist. So I used to be a computer scientist. It's something I haven't practiced for quite a few years now. And my current role is to take the lead on academic integrity for my institution. And I've just spent the last 18 months, just prior to the lockdown, just prior to the pandemic, when we started, completely revising our institutional policies, which are about a decade old. They haven't stayed static during that decade, but we had a radical rethink on the policies. And basically our strategy was driven by the change in the way that students are cheating these days, and particularly the extent of contract cheating we are either coming across or not being able to find or not being able to prove, because it's a very tricky area. And so we're looking at focusing very much more on education now rather than on punishing. Clearly, we need to make sure that justice is done and students don't get an unfair advantage out of any form of cheating. And although I tend to not use to try and discourage the use of the word misconduct and cheating in general terms, contract cheating is definitely cheating. It can't be anything else. It is the deliberate act. Therefore, I can quite honestly use the term cheating and misconduct and dishonesty when I'm talking about contract cheating. But generally, breaches of academic integrity sometimes are not deliberate, so we have to be careful about the use of language. Basically, the main difference that we're making in the policies that we have in my institution are we're putting in place lots more education for students, which we should have done a long time ago, but making sure students are all well educated in what we mean by academic integrity, what we expect of them, but also what not to do as well. And so, but also if a student has to come through the academic conduct process because of allegations of misconduct, then we make sure that they are retrained. So a lot of the time I've been spending the last 6 months, because we're just starting to implement the policies, although we by no means finished, but the work we've been doing in the last 6 months, I've just been doing lots and lots of training for lots of different people, which is a very essential part of what's needed in getting people up to speed and getting people to follow the regulations, to follow the procedures that we set in place. Because academic integrity is not just for specific people within an institution, it's everybody's job. It's an institution-wide procedure. So I'm going to stop at that point now, and I'm going to hand over. I'm going to hand back to Thomas. Thomas, do you want to nominate who's going to talk next?
Yes, yeah, either way around, but I'm just going on the order on my screen, as we always do in these situations. So Zeenath.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Hi, everyone. It's welcome, of course, to INAI's conference. It's so exciting to be the first pre-workshop workshop that we are hosting. And of course, as Thomas said, we are more a panel than a workshop. My name is Zeenath. I'm from the University of Wollongong in Dubai, which is United Arab Emirates. Currently, we are at 47 degrees Celsius, so very, very hot. But I must say, I'm very happy. I'm not organizing this year. I'm behind the scenes enjoying as a participant. But well done, of course, to the conference organizers. You guys are doing a great job. I've been really interested in academic integrity for a long time, because I myself as a student faltered, and then I had a fantastic support group from the principal to the parents. And back then they didn't have the concept of school counselors or any kind of counseling as such, but the support group that I had was like life-changing for me. So when I started teaching, and then from 2005 onwards, I started looking at why students were still, cheating, because for me it was like what a waste of energy and IQ, because it takes a lot of intelligence sometimes to get down to doing it. So I've been researching this area, and then I did my PhD on academic integrity from University of Wollongong, and I've been looking at contract cheating since 2016 when ICI organized the first International Day of Contract Cheating, and it kind of came into our radars, asking students why they thought this was okay, why students thought other students were doing it, and why they kept going back to this practice. Exactly as Thomas said, that once they had done it and they hadn't picked up on those skills, of course, they didn't think there was any other way. But there was also this one other thing that they kept looking at. So, a lot of what I've been doing here in the UAE kind of has been driven by the research that we are doing, and then the conversations we are having with students. And exactly as Irene said, we've also started looking at the policy again. Although our policy got revised in 2016-17, there's still so much work that can be done. And to recognize contract cheating specifically, training. I just had a conversation with somebody today, and they were asking me, Zeenath, how do I know the student isn't good enough, but when I ask them questions, they're able to answer all the questions. And I know that work is not theirs. So how do I prove that it's not theirs? You can't go back to a student and say, you're not good enough to be writing this work. How else do you prove this is contract cheating? So this is something that still we're just scratching the surface. It still needs so much focus and attention, and I think this is a great way to start. INAI has taken the lead. Once again, we've got this working group that's looking exclusively at contract cheating and how we can avoid it and how we can support the community on it. So it's great to be here to be talking about it. Thank you, Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Zeenath, and now head over to Sonja.
So, hello and welcome to the conference. I am one of the members of the organizing committee. So this is our first pre-conference webinar, workshop / panel. And I'm very happy that we have so many attendees. My name is Sonja BJELOBABA. I work as associated professor at the Center for Research Ethics and Bioethics at Uppsala University in Sweden. And previously, I worked at Gothenburg University with teaching and learning in higher education when I had courses in research ethics and teaching and learning in higher education for teachers, PhD students, but also staff members. And that's why my perspective is always teacher training, because that's my main focus of interest. Another perspective I have is that I'm originally from former Yugoslavia. And I can tell you that there is quite a few differences between academic integrity in former Yugoslavia and in Sweden. So it's always good to be able to compare to different systems, to different views on academic integrity. So that's another focus I have in my research and my teaching. So yeah, I'm also vice president of INAI and head of the aforementioned group addressing contract cheating that we have. So back to you, Thomas.
Yeah, thanks very much, Sonja. And then finally, Deirdre.
Hello, everybody. It's great to be with you here today. And hi to my fellow panel members. And thanks in particular to Sonja, who got us here and up and running this afternoon. I'm here from a slightly different perspective from my co-panelists, who are, I think, all coming from institutional perspectives. As Tom said, my name is Deirdre STRITCH, and I'm QA Manager with Quality and Qualifications Ireland, QQI. And that is it's a national agency. We are an awarding body, we make qualifications, and we're also a QA agency. So we have a very broad interest in the issue of academic integrity as part of our overall interest in maintaining the standards of the qualifications that we make and that we quality assure. In addition to that broad general interest, QQI also acquired new statutory functions in relation to academic integrity at the end of 2019, and I have direct responsibility in that area. So new laws were commenced at the end of that year, so about 18 months ago at this stage, which made it an offence to facilitate learners to cheat in any way, to advertise cheating services and or to publish advertisements for cheating services, and implementing that new legislation falls within my remit. One of the first things that we did when we acquired that new function was to establish a national academic integrity network, which comprises all of our public higher education institutions, that's our universities, our institutes of technology, and those larger private higher education institutions which had their quality assurance approved by QQI at that time. And so one of the things that I and my colleagues in QQI do is to support and to facilitate that peer network, to develop resources to help each other and themselves to address the challenges faced by academic misconduct and most prominently contract cheating. So I'm sure we'll have lots of opportunity to discuss that later on today, but that network has been immensely productive over the last 18 months, despite the challenges faced by the COVID pandemic, and is about to publish a range of resources, which we'll be hosting on our website, and I can provide links to those for anyone who's interested afterwards. So my interest and my contribution is really from the national perspective and what it is that QA agencies and or awarding bodies can do to support their member organizations to develop effective policies to embed a culture of academic integrity, and as part of that, combat the challenges faced by academic misconduct and contract cheating in particular. Thanks, Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Deirdre. Hopefully you've all gathered now. We've got a very esteemed international panel representing 4 different countries, lots of experience at the ground level and at the policy making level, but also with experience in other countries as well, very, very widely traveled and involved with activities surrounding academic integrity and addressing contract cheating. So fabulous to have these 4 people with us today. I want to go straight on with our first question, which is really just think about, what does contract cheating look like to you? So what kind of things are you seeing happening in your institution or your country? And has this changed in the past year while we've all been suffering from the effects of the pandemic? I think probably it's one to come round to everyone. Should we stick with the same order we were just in to make this one nice and easy and start with Irene? Yeah.
Yes, contract cheating and how it's changed, particularly during the pandemic. As we've said before, contract cheating isn't just about writing essays. It's about a whole range of different services. And one of the things that I know has been happening, and I think there is an article in the Times Higher today saying students have been outsourcing their exam writing to ghostwriters during the pandemic. So if they've been given exams to do, they've been paying ghostwriters to do their exams for them. And I think we've been aware of that. I don't know how much of this has been picked up. So that's one of the things that always has existed to some extent, but because everything has now gone online, it's now a new opportunity for the essay mills to make money, the contract cheating providers. So that's one of the things. But in general terms, what contract cheating looks like, as far as my own institution is concerned, we have far too much of it. We never know whether we are getting it all, and I suspect we don't actually find it all, because it's really very difficult to find. We invested in Turnitin's authorship tool about 18 months ago, something like that. And we've been using that. It's not a silver bullet, but it actually does provide us with the ability to look at a student holistically, look at all a student's work and compare that work. So if we suspect there might be contract cheating, it's done some of the work for us in bringing together the student's work. But there's still a very, very big job to do in order to decide whether or not there are signs of any contract cheating there, and if so, what to do about it. And that's one of the things our policies have been changed to consider, is how do we guide staff, how do we support staff, because it takes a long time to actually bring a case of contract cheating. If you suspect there is a case, it takes a lot of time and effort. And certainly in the last year, staff haven't had that time. They've been trying to teach online, but sometimes during the year, they've been trying to actually do some face-to-face teaching as well, certainly with some subjects. So it's been a really difficult time for them. And if we then ask them to spend a lot of time investigating students, even with new tools, it actually is quite an ask of them. It's quite a big demand on their time when they're already very busy. So that's part of the training I've been doing, is to try and help them, to try and provide some guidance so that we don't get a lot of false positives where people are reporting things that are not contract cheating, but we try to pick up the cases that are. The other thing that we're getting more and more of is we're getting whistleblowers. And the whistleblowers are coming forward. There are two sorts of whistleblowers that are coming forward. One is the actual ghostwriters themselves, where they haven't been paid. So we get quite a lot of them coming forward saying, I did some work for this student and they didn't pay me. So, do something about it. And the others are students who are perhaps living with the other students or people who know the other students. And they're asking us why we've given the student marks for work they haven't done themselves. And so we are gradually just really on the hoof. We're trying to develop policies for how we deal with whistleblowers. We haven't got there yet, but it's quite an interesting dynamic, that area, and how are you fair about dealing with it. So there are issues there to do with whether we should be following up. And I would say generally, if we have some intelligence, it is our duty to follow up on that for the benefit of the students that aren't cheating, but how we deal with that and how we respond to that. So, but even if you manage to bring together some evidence, there is also the problem then of how you present that evidence to the adjudication process. In my institution, for less serious forms of misconduct, we have academic conduct officers. But for cases of contract cheating, generally that case will go to a panel. It might go via a viva first of all, so the student has an interview and what happens in the interview goes towards a panel. But the panel then needs to be convinced that the evidence is substantiated based on balance of probabilities. That's the legal proof that we use. But that's actually quite difficult sometimes to convince a panel. So panelists need to be trained and panelists need to be aware of what it is they're looking for and the fact that they won't get high similarity usually with a contract cheated essay or a piece of work. So it's those kind of things. So lots of different things there to get the rest of the panelists started, I think. So I can say more, but let's move on to one of my colleagues. So I'll pass back to Thomas and we can, or are we going to go straight to Zeenath?
Yeah, I think we can pass straight on to Zeenath. I mean, that was great to get it started, so thanks, Irene. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Irene and Thomas. Yeah, I think where we are at, basically, we are still looking at awareness because there's so little of it. When we started celebrating the first year International Day of Action Against Contract Cheating, everybody asked, what was that? A lot of people didn't even know what contract cheating was. And then, so it really, has been a lot more focus on the awareness part of it rather than anything else at this point, where we are training lecturers about what contract cheating is, that it is different from plagiarism. Don't just look for similarity percentages, and in fact be more worried when you have a 0% similarity in a report. And usually when I say that in trainings, I get really odd looks like this woman doesn't know what she's talking about, till I actually start explaining what contract cheating is, and then how we have in the past, had cases and how we've gone about identifying them, and they go like, oh, okay, I see. So maybe I've had some, I don't know. So that's the lecturers. Then the committee members themselves, as Irene said, they go straight for the evidence, and the evidence needs to be in that nice little neat package that shows us the percentage and shows us the screenshot of the bulletin to show us all the colorful little highlights. And if that's not there and it's just a definition and a recording, sometimes it's very difficult to convince the committee members that there is something other than plagiarism that they need to be looking at. The students themselves, a lot of students have come to us with a lot of preconceived notions about what is okay and what is not okay, because they come from such different backgrounds. We are salad bowl of almost 200 nationalities in the UAE. And I say salad bowl because they don't really mix. They all stay within their own little groups and stuff. And so we've got, even schooling wise, we've got like a host of different schools. We've got the British curriculum, all of it came from Cambridge to London. We've got the Swiss, the IB curriculum. We've got the Indian curriculum, Pakistani curriculum, Persian curriculum, German, French. So we've got a host of different schools all in one country, right? And then these students, of course, graduate, and then some of them come to us as well. So again, it's the same thing that, you know, they've come from such different backgrounds. They've got such different ideas about what is okay and what is not okay, depending on what they were exposed to, that when they finally get pulled up and they go, yeah, but, you know, maybe somebody will say, my sister did it because I was sick, and, you know, she's doing the same subject in another university. And, you know, I know the stuff. It's not like I don't know the stuff, but I was sick or I was busy and this and that. And so, you know, it starts like that. So it's awareness that we are really, really focusing on right now. We launched the Center for Academic Integrity in the UAE last year, and now we've got like 5-6 universities who are involved. So it is growing. The wave is rippling into other universities, into their campuses, where their students and staff are now talking about it. They're getting involved in the training as well. What's changed in the pandemic for us is the new things that we are saying. And from what I've seen in Twitter, they're not new for a lot of other people, but they're very new in our region. One thing was, like, for instance, we received ghost writer emails phishing for students who they probably have written for, maybe didn't get paid for, or wanted to blackmail the student. And they're trying to see if the student belongs to our university. So this is something that we've not come across before. The other one was the advertisements that have started on, oh, summer is coming. You don't want, you're already fatigued. You don't want to attend classes. I can attend the classes for you. So, you know, these are the newer versions of contract cheating that we are seeing. As Irene said, Thomas said, it's not just essay writing. It's so many different things that they could be doing and having a third parties doing for them. So from the UAE, this much, I guess, at the moment. Sonja?
Yes, well, Sweden is a bit special case in all of this, as I usually say. When we did the GEMS project, Sweden was really an outlier because we basically don't have contract cheating it's not as common as in many other countries, but it exists. And what we have seen thus far is that there are quite a lot of private initiatives, people that are offering their services and giving just proofreading, and behind that you have some contract cheating, or offering to sell or to buy essays. But up until COVID-19 situation, we didn't really have professional essay mills. Now we do. So that's one thing that has been different during COVID-19. And there are many reasons that we really didn't have as many cases. Basically, corruption in Sweden is much less common than in many other countries. The awareness is very high that students that they are learning for the sake of the learning, that they're going to need this. So they're very motivated. They're quite older than in many other countries, because people don't go directly necessarily to study. And the education doesn't cost you. So it's not as high stakes as in countries where you have to pay for your education. So there are several different reasons behind it. When it comes to the system, the awareness is unfortunately quite low amongst the teachers that this might happen. Theses can be written both in Swedish and in English. And of course, as I have said, you don't have many essay mills in Swedish, but you have many more essays in English that might be used, of course. We do use text matching software. It's the same software for the whole country, which helps a bit, but not as much. But basically what is needed is raising awareness. So back to you, Thomas.
Yeah, well, we'll hand over to Deirdre just to round up what more is happening in Ireland. Yeah.
I might just pick up on a few points made by my co-panelists earlier, just so that I can see some common threads perhaps emerging through this, and then I'll talk a little bit about the picture specifically in Ireland. Irene, you mentioned that you've seen more instances of people highlighting cases, it's coming forward to report instances and so on. And we've seen that here too. And we have seen a variety of individuals coming forward. So there's the ex-boyfriend, ex-girlfriend, who might want to let it be known that the work of their former partner had in fact all been done by them. So we've had that's kind of a long-standing piece. But we have had instances recently, and Zeenath, I think you've mentioned this, whereby a representative of an essay mill or a ghostwriter contacts a higher education institution and names learners who they've completed work for, but who haven't paid, for example. So this can be quite a high risk activity or behavior for learners to become engaged with, and it's important that that fact is made known to learners, that they understand the risk that they're taking on for themselves. So besides that, the picture that we have here, I would say that the definition of contract cheating is as set out by Thomas at the start, whereby this isn't just commercial entities that we're talking about here. It can be family members, friends, etc., who are with the best intentions in the world and perhaps unintentionally and unknowingly overstepping the mark in terms of providing assistance. Our understanding is that's probably still the highest rate of instances of contract cheating, although of course it wouldn't be considered that by any of the individuals involved. We are conscious that there is also use of commercial assignment writing or essay writing services by students, and potentially, again anecdotally, there is some indication that those rates of usage may have increased in the past 18 months and may be related to the COVID-19 pandemic. Some trends that we've seen within that, certainly certain groups of students would appear to perhaps be more vulnerable or at risk when it comes to this type of activity. We are seeing some indication that international learners, or those for whom English isn't a first language, may be more vulnerable or more at risk because the stakes and the challenges are higher for them in terms of effectively engaging with the learner. And of course, that comes back to us as a country and as institutions to ensure that those learners are adequately and appropriately supported when they come here to engage in studies. Students on business and computer science related courses, again, we don't know if it's because the academic staff are perhaps more aware and better equipped to identify misconduct when it happens in those subject areas, or whether or not there is something about those subject areas that makes them more susceptible. That there's lots of scope there for further exploration. And also we've seen mature learners, those who may have been out of education and training for some time, and whose lives life situations come together to mean they have more pressure placed upon them when it comes to completing their studies and so on. The other thing that we're noticing is that 2018, 2019, learners still had to go out and seek out these services. There were a couple of proactive decisions that a learner had to make in order to engage in contract cheating. And I mean that, and by that I mean the commercial for profit side of things. So a learner had to actively decide to enter a search in a search engine, assistance for my essay or whatever it happened to be. They then had to decide to engage with an online service of some kind. What we have seen since the start of the pandemic is contract cheating sites, commercial contract cheating sites, becoming much more proactive in actively going out and targeting learners. So what we're seeing is an individual learner may have purchased an assignment from a company. The company will then offer that learner reduced fees on subsequent purchases, or indeed free subsequent purchases, in return for the contact details, by which I mean phone numbers and so on, of their peers, their classmates, and details of forthcoming exams. So then those other learners will receive directly targeted messages from the company by the hundreds, I mean spamming, saying something to the effect of, "Hi John, we understand that you've got an assignment for Dr. Glendinning that's due on Friday week in first principles of marketing. Can we help you with that? And there will be repeated messages of that sort to the learner's private phone number, to their Facebook Messenger account, and so on. And this is now at a scale that's now coming to the attention of the higher education institutions. And that's obviously much more concerning and presents more challenges, I think, to institutions to manage. So there are just a few trends, Thomas, emerging from the Irish context.
Brilliant, thanks, Deirdre. We've touched on so many of our prepared questions already, just in that very, very first question, and we're halfway through our time. So amazing how quickly it goes. But there is an associated question. Some of you've answered this already, so don't feel you have to all answer. But what is the awareness like at national level about contract cheating in your country? And is there anything you've been involved with to try and increase awareness? So that's really the area I'd like to pick up on next. So let's, it seems a bit unfair, but for ease of continuing, we'll stick with Irene first.
Well, it does, because I get the lion's share. I can say everything, can't I? Which isn't really fair. But perhaps we should go the other way around next time. But let's just start here. So I've been doing a lot of webinars, and I've been doing webinars for both teachers, for managers, for students. I've been doing webinars. What we haven't said actually is that some of us in this group are members of an advisory group. So Thomas, because you haven't said very much at all, being the chair, and I know you have a lot more you could say. So I'm sure you'll get your opportunity to talk very soon, but I'll speak for you. Thomas, myself, and also Deirdre are members of the Quality Assurance Agency, the QAA advisory group on academic integrity. And as part of that group, we've been actively involved, monitoring what's going on, but also taking action for the UK and in other countries as well, to try to raise awareness about contract cheating. And one of the things that QAA has done is to put forward a charter. And I think I was told this morning 147 institutions have now signed that charter, which is amazing. And that's in the United Kingdom, I think. So that's really rather important. And that is actually asking institutions to commit to integrity and to commit to certain standards and to commit to following the guidelines that QAA has issued. And I know QQI have been very active in producing fantastic guidelines. So Deirdre will talk about that when it comes to her turn. So that's one of the things certainly I've been involved with and Thomas has been involved in. But another part of that, and it's something that the audience might think about doing as well, is we have regional groups in the UK. We're just beginning to start the regional groups. We started a regional group in the Midlands, which is run by a lady called Sandy Dam from University of Loughborough. And she invited all the Midlands UK, Midlands England universities to join her group. And there are something like 20 universities involved in that group. And we meet every so often, every few months, and we talk about the problems that we're having, and we share intelligence. And that helps us in terms of our local policies and our local systems. It also makes us realise that we're not alone, we have similar problems. And we use Chatham House rules for that, so that we can be very honest about what's happening in our institutions. So that's something that you might think about doing wherever you are in the world. And I know Thomas has just started a group in the London area, which I'm going to ask him to talk about that when we finish this kind of round of questions. So that's one of the things I've been doing, but generally raising awareness and to kind of train the trainers. So I can teach the teachers, raise awareness among them, what they should be looking for, but also help them, provide guidance for them, provide guidance notes, provide materials for them so that they can then train the students and raise awareness in that way. So That's enough for starters, and I'll hand over to Zeenath now.
Thanks, Irene. So what we've been doing is, in the process of doing all the awareness activities, we had students come up and tell us, but when we were in school, it was okay for us to get models from the stationery stores, which were science projects. It was like, hold on, what do you mean models? And then one of the students who had by then already graduated and become a research assistant for me, she went around in one part of the city, and she took photos of these ads that were being put up on these stationery stores, where they said, we provide printing, photocopying, research models, projects. So then she went in and she interviewed them, and she asked them, and they said, we used to just sell these, materials for school projects. And then ultimately we had parents come in and tell us, we don't have time, we can pay you, we bought the material, can you just make it for us? And they had so much demand that they actually transformed one part of their stationery store into a workshop where they were now making projects and selling projects, right? And then these students would be taking these projects to school and saying, these are my projects, and displaying it. So, it's contract cheating right there. And so we've been really looking at this aspect, like from school perspective. And we did some preliminary studies here, and we saw that, for instance, when we talked to parents, parents where the school was allowing the student to do projects at home were more inclined to help the student, because it was at home, they could see the student struggling, or the student didn't have time, or there was a deadline and the student wasn't finishing. So they felt it was easier for them to just get it done and then send it with the student home, versus schools where they were getting more of the project done on campus, like in the school classrooms itself. So we've been trying to understand how schools come about approaching this. And a lot of, unfortunately, we came across teachers who automatically appreciate the projects that are obviously not done by the child, but very high quality, very nice. And, that's really appreciated. And the one that is actually done by the child doesn't get that level of appreciation or, the marks or recognition. So, and then there have been teachers at our workshops who have said, but, when I do not mark a project that obviously is very good, then the parent starts fighting with me for the marks, because they're like, how can you say it's a bad project? It's such a good project. It hits all the rubrics that you've given, right? And then she's like, it's so difficult to explain to the parent that, but you've done it. So then how can I mark it? Because it's your project. So then, and now with the pandemic, especially, we did a workshop in Jan where we had about 150 teachers attending, and they said it's impossible, because there's always a parent right there off the screen, whenever we're doing any kind of assessment, whether it's formative, summative, doesn't matter. There's a parent sitting there, no matter how many times we scream out in the screen that please don't answer questions for your child. They're doing their assignments for them. They're doing these projects for them, and then submitting it as PowerPoints or whatever. So so our primary focus has kind of shifted from higher education here, and we are looking at the source, if you may, that where you've got students who've got parents who are doing the projects for them. You've got schools, systems, assessment methods that are kind of encouraging this kind of behavior, because it's not recognizing and pulling up and questioning the behavior, rather rewarding and recognizing that kind of behavior. And in a lot of ways, the problem then happens. The student is growing up for 12 years with that kind of mentality. By the time they come to us at higher education, they've already set, this is their go-to system. If they don't know something, if they didn't understand something, they don't have time, they find it difficult, they're going to look for outsourcing methods, because that's what they were used to in schools. So this is what we've been doing here. Like this has kind of become our focus where contract cheating is concerned. Sonja?
Yes, I recognize this help from family and friends, because that was the only area where we had a problem in Sweden, according to the GEMS project. I assume that it's higher, of course, both that numbers and numbers for professionals. The SMEs are higher than the GEMS project has shown. But what we have done thus far is to concentrate on teacher training. and I myself have participated in many conferences in academic integrity, and many universities are really trying to organize and invite me or other colleagues that are working with this to their teacher training sessions. And that's basically mostly what we are doing thus far. So we need to raise awareness, and when it comes to policies that we are going to talk about today, we need to distinguish contract cheating as a separate category, because it is a problem in Sweden as well, even if it's much more hidden than in many other countries. And what we do in teacher training mostly is focus not only telling people that there is a problem called contract cheating and what's it all about, it's basically to discuss assessment design and different strategies in assessment design and how they can be used, and also point teachers that they can point their students towards different sorts of help, like academic writing institutions that can help students if they have writing issues, so that they feel less pressure to outsource their work. So I think it's Deirdre.
Thanks, Sonja. Yeah, just picking up on Zeenath and Sonja's point there. In Ireland, we have focused initially on higher education. Our laws pertain to all education training outside of the school system, but we focused on higher ed to begin with. But that exclusion of school awards from the legislation is interesting. It's an interesting omission, actually, because as Zeenath rightly points out, that patterns of behaviour which become habitual amongst school students in secondary or high school then have to be unlearned when they enter into higher education, and there's an entirely different set of expectations and requirements placed upon them. So when it comes to awareness raising, from a national perspective, we have done a lot and made huge progress in the last 18 months to 2 years when it comes to higher education, but actually probably, my apologies, actually we probably need to be targeting the school system, school students, their parents and teachers at a much earlier stage in order to have a significant impact, really, to change culture, which this is ultimately all about. So in terms of what steps we have taken in terms of awareness raising, I would say that end of 2019, awareness levels generally were quite low across the board. There were exceptions, there were pockets of knowledge and research and expertise, etc., dotted around the place in individual institutions, etc. But by and large, if you were to take a national snapshot, knowledge about awareness of skill sets when it comes to detecting, preventing, etc., contract cheating were reasonably low across the higher education and training sector. That has changed dramatically since the introduction of the legislation. Not because we have been aggressively taking legal cases or anything of that sort, but the legislation has been a useful catalyst to commence a national dialogue at an appropriately high level about academic integrity and contract cheating. And we use that to our advantage. So as I mentioned earlier, we did convene that National Academic Integrity Network, which comprises all of the public institutions. Representatives on that network are at a senior level. They're often registrars, deans of teaching and learning, and so on. And so on foot of the activities of that network, supported by KQI, awareness levels are now much higher than they were. Scope for much improvement and further work, absolutely, but there has been a significant shift. So as Irene mentioned, the network has produced guidelines, non-statutory guidelines around academic integrity. 4 key areas there: embedding a culture of academic integrity, preventing academic misconduct, so 2 sides of the same coin, I guess, detecting misconduct when it happens, and as our panelists have mentioned before, much more challenging and difficult for academic staff to detect this kind of contract cheating than more traditional forms of plagiarism, for example. And then finally, managing and sanctioning misconduct when it does happen. So those guidelines are going to be published in the next week or so to the KQI website. And it is very likely that in time, KQI, and actually I mean in the short to medium term, KQI will be publishing statutory QA guidelines addressing academic misconduct, and I would imagine that we will be adopting in large part elements of those National Academic Integrity Network guidelines that are already there. So this is something that we are encouraging institutions to put on the agenda, literally put on the agenda at a very high level to ensure that their staff are aware and supported to respond appropriately, and that learners know. So for example, the network, in conjunction with our Union of Students in Ireland and ourselves, produced an online video campaign last year to ensure that learners were aware of the new laws that we have in Ireland, to aware of the dangers and risks of engaging in contract cheating, and then equally that they were aware and were signposted towards the supports available to them within their individual institutions. So each individual higher education institution gave a link that was accessible from that video to the academic writing, support services, etc., that they have available within their institution, so that learners know not only is this behaviour wrong and risky and now illegal, they also know where they can go to within their own institutions to seek alternative assistance and support if and when they find themselves under pressure or in difficulty. We do hope to have produced by September, by the new academic year, hopefully, a range of other resources and supports aimed directly at academic staff to assist them on the ground when it comes to things like detecting misconduct, reporting it, and to assist institutions in putting frameworks, and that's the term we use, in place in their institutions to ensure that they have robust systems in place. So a lot done, a lot more to go, and we should probably be focusing on the school system as part of that national approach.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I mean, I guess I should just briefly say here that I'm trying not to answer too many of the questions and to just keep the discussion moving. So we've got such a lot of stuff we could get through today, but also from my point of view, I spent many years being one of the only people in the world who was working on this problem, and now there are so many other people who have picked this up and really made a difference in their own countries that I'm keen that we get as many of those ideas out there to all of you as possible. So something for you to build upon in your own institution, in your own country. And Irene mentioned we have set up the London and South East England Academic Integrity Network recently, and I'm really pleased that several of our attendees are part of that network. It is early days. We've had a very productive meetings so far. We've got some working groups operating as well, and I can tell people just want that opportunity to discuss academic integrity and the challenges to academic integrity, of which contract cheating is one, within their own local setting. I know there's another group being set up to cover the other regions of the UK that aren't yet covered. I know that other countries are able to think of similar ideas. But even if it's not your country, is not at that level yet, then please do use ENAI and other similar organizations and try and get involved with the activity there, because it's so valuable for sharing practice. And as we just try and go beyond now just raising awareness, but trying to really make a difference. And that's why also, just to note, there are some questions in the chat, one particularly for Irene and one particular, I think, for Zeenath. Might want to just post some answers to the first two questions. But apart from that, keen to think a bit more about the areas we're talking about today, really processes and policies. So the next question, and we'll go in reverse order to Deirdre first, is what should you do about contract cheating in terms of a process level at an individual institution? And how should these processes operate? So the kind of things you may want to think about as well, about do you need any form of proof, and what should you say in university policies? So just any general thoughts, and I mean, feel free to skip over in the cases where you don't have any, that's absolutely fine. Yeah.
Thanks, Thomas. So as I said, I'm coming at this from a slightly different perspective than you guys who are located within institutions. So one of the things I would suggest is important to any institution is that policies are simply a tool to achieve your objectives. And I would say that it's critical for any institution to decide at an early stage what it is that it wants to achieve in terms of academic integrity. There should be a strategy around academic integrity in place within the institution. And that strategy needs to be resourced, otherwise it's not going to be achieved. So the policies and the procedures that you then develop are there to help you achieve whatever your objectives are as part of that strategy. And that is going to help. So at a start, you want to surface academic integrity within the institution. You want to put it on the agenda and I mean that literally, that it is on the agenda, it's a standing agenda item on all of your key academic decision-making bodies, so that it's not falling off the table. It's not a peripheral issue that only comes to the fore when there's a crisis or there's a problem or when some external body comes and tells you you need to be doing something about that, that it is something that is critical and central to you as an institution. And it is part about maintaining the standards of your qualifications. So it's on the agenda, you have a strategy in place, that strategy is resourced, and then you have policies which help you achieve that and are cascaded down. That's a key piece. I'm coming at this from the perspective, obviously, of the agency and what we look for. So we want to see institutions taking actions which embed a culture of academic integrity, and that is around communication and awareness raising amongst staff, amongst students, and that is proactively supported through action. So are there induction modules that are made available to all new learners, new students in the institution, so that they know what is expected of them and that they have the skills and knowledge base to effectively engage with their learning, for example? Are all of your staff, what continuing professional development are you putting in place to support your staff to ensure that they are aware, one, of your institutional policies and procedures in this area, two, to modify their teaching, learning and assessment methods to minimize the opportunities for academic misconduct to take place and just to improve their overall effectiveness. And three, that those staff feel supported and confident that where they do have suspicions of academic misconduct or of contract cheating having taken place, that they can bring those forward, that they know that they will be taken seriously, that there is a system in place to enable them to investigate or that will take over the investigation for them. Because as we all know, pinch time comes, it's examination period, staff are already under a huge amount of pressure. And many times we hear that there's a reluctance to report suspicions because frankly, the burden that is then placed on individual academics to do something about that, and perhaps for nothing to come of it, is just too much. So that there is an environment, an overall culture in place that enables staff to act on their suspicions. So that's a range of things at a very broad level, and I'm sure Irene and Sonja and Zeenath will want to talk more about the detail of those. From a national level, what we're doing to ensure that happens is that we are embedding academic integrity now as a formal area within each of our regulatory interactions with providers. So for example, our higher education institutions are required to submit an annual quality report. Academic integrity is now a category within that providers, that institutions need to report on. At the moment, that's not quantitative. We're just asking, what have you been doing in this space? What initiatives, what policies and procedures do you have, et cetera, et cetera. But we intend to progress that to collecting more statistical and quantitative data so that to inform both the institution's own policies and procedures, because you need data, and our own nationally. And that comes to my second part, and that is the data that you have to inform that strategy that you take. We know from our own institutions, and I understand that the picture is similar elsewhere, is that contract cheating isn't often identified as a discrete category of academic misconduct within most institutions, and that contract cheating is often subsumed under some other broader headings, such as plagiarism, for example, which makes it very difficult then for both the institution at institutional level or for us at national level to really get a good hold of what's happening on the ground. And your policies can only be truly effective when they're targeted and they are informed by the evidence base. So the first thing would be to ensure that you are capturing the information adequately on this through the terminologies and definitions that you're using within your institution. So evidence-informed strategy, supported through policies and procedures, which can be realized because they're resourced, and there's a two-pronged approach addressing both learners and staff. In summary, Thomas.
Yeah, I think we were going in reverse order, so that would move on to Sonja.
Yeah, great for having this national approach. I'm coming from another perspective, from not even university perspective, because I don't influence policy writing, but I can try to talk and influence people and tell them about this problem and hopefully gain get awareness raised. I think it's very important, even when we get a policy, to concentrate on what's next, to have a clear action plan, who is doing what, and have proper teacher training. So, because otherwise policy is just a piece of paper. We need to have policies, but we also need to raise awareness to teachers. We have to explain to them how to report, what signs they are supposed to look for when it comes to contract cheating, how to organize their teaching, how to organize assessment to prevent contract cheating. So it's not only about policy, it's really a complex system that needs to be proposed for an institution in order to make a change, a real change. So I think it's really very complex. I'm all for policy documents, but that's unfortunately not enough. So I'm just looking for the next step as well. But I think I know that Irene has a lot of say on what kind of policies we need. So I'm going to let her speak now.
Well, we'll go to, I think Zeenath is waiting to
sorry,
speak.
then Zeenath first.
No, that's okay.
But definitely, then we'll go to Irene. And yeah, Irene, it would be great if you could tell us a bit about what kind of policies. Yeah.
Absolutely. I think Deirdre kind of hit it at the head. What we have seen is there needs to be a buy-in at the top level, right? We can be doing a lot of work in the grassroots level with the students and with lecturers and teaching assistants. But if the buy-in doesn't come from the top management, and if it is not an agenda by itself in education committee meetings and academic board meetings, it's something that's just going to slip through the cracks, right? And we've seen the way to make that work is actually to show evidence that this is happening on campus. This is what the impact is. This is how it's impacting our students and their learning and the grades and how it can impact the reputation. In a lot of ways, I think I was lucky because of the 2015 scandal that happened in Australia with the contract cheating thing. Because although it had nothing to do with us, because we are a branch campus of the main university, and about 15 universities in Australia were involved with that scandal, it kind of became a wake-up call. So the moment I say the word contract cheating, everybody kind of sits up to listen to what is being said, right? So I can't take credit for that, but I have seen that because of that, what happened, the top management, there is a buy-in from the top management at my institution level, which is why when we do talk about it, people listen. The other side of it is the detection and penalty. Very, very important. Awareness is great. We can train people as much as we want, but if you're not detecting and we are not penalizing, it's a huge message that we're giving to students. And other teachers are thinking, hey, I can't be the only one doing this fight. It's not worth the effort because it's such an effort to collect evidence and to provide evidence that the contract cheating has really, really happened, right? Again, the buy-in from the top management is really, really helpful because when lecturers do come forward, our institution really listens and, the committee is told to listen to these evidences and if need be approach us who are in the university, who know about academic integrity or researching academic integrity to come back and ask us before they make decisions. So that would be my two folds. Irene.
Okay, yes, actually, I was going to make the same point that Deirdre's made and Zeenath has made about buying from the top. And that is the reason I was involved in revising our policies, because I managed to convince the top level that we needed to do something. It took a little while. What we are short of at the moment in my institution, I don't think anyone is listening from my institution, but if they are, I keep harping on about this, so they're already aware. I say it all the time. I don't have enough resources to do my job at the moment, so I need a lot more help with a lot more support. In terms of the policies themselves, I mean, I suppose it's kind of broken up into. We're going to say a lot more about policies in some of the workshops that are coming up during the conference. So lots more to come. And I need to use my hands here because I haven't got my diagram in front of me. But we have, you need to have policies for the education and the training and that side of things. That needs to be part of the overall strategy. So you need to decide what your strategy is. And in the case of my institution, we decided we would move away very much from a judicial strategy, a kind of punishing, hang 'em and flog 'em type of, I don't know how you're going to translate that into Russian, but so, move away from that kind of thinking about the students as all naughty people who've done naughty things. Actually, these are students who are still learning. And a lot of students will come in with the wrong ideas. Let's give them a chance. So this is the new strategy. So no matter what a student has done, they will get at least one chance to put it right. We will listen to them, we will talk to them, we will find out what it is they've done wrong. So that's part of the strategy. And then hopefully they won't continue to do it again. We have a strategy also for, this is quite an important one that's not been mentioned yet. We've talked about blackmail and we've talked about the pressure that is put on students by essay mills and so on. But once a student gets on that treadmill, it's very difficult to get off. Once a student is being blackmailed, where do they go? It's difficult for them to come forward without actually incriminating themselves. So make it easy for them. Accept that the students may perhaps want to come forward and confess. So we've put in place a route for students to do that. We work very much, and I noticed there's a question from Litsa about this, working with students. We work very closely with the Student Union, and both in terms of awareness raising, but also in terms of students having a route to go to where they can talk frankly and honestly about their situation. So that's what we do. So occasionally students, I had a question earlier. I have a shared email called Integrity Threats that anyone can post to. So that can be used for things like, tell me if you're aware of an essay mill, send me the advertising that you're getting from essay mills, but also tell me if you're aware of another student cheating. So, and we do get them coming through that route. So that can be quite helpful, because that route I can find out all sorts of things that are going on. So I've just had a dried up moment. I've forgotten where I was going with that one. So never mind, I'll move on. So I was going in a certain direction with that, and I've lost my direction. So I'll pick it up in a minute. So there is that side of it, but there's also the kind of judicial side of the policies. So you need to make sure that students don't get away with it if you can. So there's the kind of detecting, supporting staff in order to bring cases. But you need to make sure that students are treated fairly, because we have a duty of care to our students, even though they might have done something pretty evil in our standards, in our terms. We need to make sure those students are supported and that they're not in any danger. So if they're being threatened with blackmail by an essay mill or a ghostwriter or somebody else, or if they're, because we know that students are threatened with if they don't pay up more money, even if they haven't actually used the essays. So these companies don't care about the students' welfare. So if we give students a route where they can actually talk to someone and get help, and then we can take them through the process, and they will have to face the penalty, but we can help them and try to correct their behaviour so that hopefully they don't do it again. Now, I can't tell you whether this is going to work. It's too early in the game, but certainly this is the strategy that we're putting in place. But the problem is bringing the staff with us, because there's no point in having something like that as our strategy if everyone's going to ignore it. So, and the problem with doing that is that we are going to get a massive number of cases initially. We're going to get a rise in cases if people are taking it seriously, and that is already happening. Okay, so I'm already seeing a massive number of cases coming forward. And already our Students' Union came to me late last week to say we can't cope with the number of students that are coming for help. So that is a good sign that people are taking it seriously, but we're already hitting on the resourcing problems So that is my next job, is to try and resolve the resourcing problems. So that's one of the things I'm working on in the background, is to try and ease that situation. So that'll give you a few ideas anyway of things that we're doing, but I can't tell you whether it's going to make any difference because it's too early in the game. But that's where we're moving to. So hopefully, what we're trying to do is to be much fairer to students than the old policies and systems used to be. Encourage staff to report anything that comes up, but be proportional about what they report, so we don't end up getting flooded with non-cases. And then be quite firm but fair about the policies, but include re-education in all the policies as well. So I'm going to leave it at that for now and pass back to Thomas.
Yeah, thanks, Irene. I mean, everything you said is so important about thinking of the students as our partners as well, and making sure they have the support in place, because one reason they go to external firms and they end up contract cheating is because they don't feel there is support in place, or they don't know what they're doing about that. Sometimes I think we get guests arriving in our broadcasts who we don't expect, but we appreciate everyone joining us, hopefully learning a little bit about contract cheating along the way as well. But there is something that's come up on Twitter, and it was something we're hoping to touch upon, which is the idea of the legal issues involved with this and how well the legal responses are working around the world. Because as Claire Johnson has said on Twitter, that contract cheating is not illegal in every country. And in fact, it's not really illegal in the vast majority of countries. But is that a good solution? And how well is that one working? So I'm going to suggest that, I mean, Deirdre, I know you've been doing a lot of work on this. It might be something you'd like to address.
Sure. So as I mentioned earlier, we have new laws in Ireland. They were commenced at the end of 2019. So just to be clear what our laws do, because obviously I know there are some other jurisdictions that have new laws in place as well, but they're all slightly different and designed to meet the particular needs of individual jurisdictions. So our law prohibits any assistance be given to a learner to help them cheat. So it is an offence to help a learner cheat in an exam, get an unfair advantage is the terminology in an exam setting, in an assignment or assessment setting of any kind. So it's an offence to impersonate a learner, it's an offence to provide any materials or any support or assistance that would give that learner an unfair advantage. It's also an offence now to advertise cheating services and to publish advertisements for cheating services. So that's the law as we have it. And as I say, we've had it since end of 2019. So just pre the COVID-19 pandemic hitting, and that's been both a blessing and a challenge. Well, a blessing in the sense that it elevated the whole topic of academic integrity and how we should be addressing it at national level anyway. It came about, it coincided with the new laws in terms of shining a light on this topic, but a challenge because everybody's resources, ours as an agency and institutional resources, were immediately redirected just to keeping the show on the road. Now, it's worth noting that in an Irish context, what we established pretty quickly is that a lot of the commercial contract cheating that takes place is not domestically based. And the laws are only designed, we only have the VRAs or the power to take legal action against domestically based contract cheating services. It is worth noting that the law as we have it is written in a way that it's sufficiently broad, it encapsulates anybody who assists a learner to cheat. So that's, as we mentioned earlier in the ENAI definition, parents, friends, other family members, etc. But the national approach is not to take legal action against individuals who assist in that way. It is to confine the laws to pursuing those who are engaged in commercial for-profit cheating services. So most of those services are not based domestically. Those that are, we have been pretty effective already. It's been quite helpful to use the law to have those removed or to minimize their impact. And we have arrangements in place with various publishers, for example, to have ads removed when they appear and for data to be shared with us. However, certainly for us in an Irish context, the vast majority of these contract cheating services are based overseas. And so the law has a much more limited capacity to address those. What we have done is be able to compile lists, share those lists, and we are talking, we've commenced discussions with ISPs, internet service providers, to see can we geo-block those sites in any way, and there's still a lot to be explored from a legal perspective on if and how that can work. That picture may obviously be quite different in other jurisdictions. I know in the UK and Australia and the US, for example, a lot of the commercial, or a number at least, of commercial contract cheating sites are based domestically, and so the laws may be more effective there, or at least have a broader impact there. So from our perspective, the law has been, or having new laws in this area, has been a welcome addition. It has certainly helped us in terms of minimizing that national market. But they've also had some soft impacts, very important soft impacts, in terms of raising the profile of this as a topic at national level with all of the key stakeholders, including the institutions, in terms of putting it firmly on the table at a senior level with higher education institutions themselves, and getting them to take this seriously. So I would say that the amount of positive impact that we've had in the last 18 months, a significant amount of that can be attributed to having those new laws. Now, I know that lawmakers don't introduce laws because of their soft impacts, but nonetheless, it would be hard to overstate the positive soft impacts that the legislation has had in Ireland.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Deirdre. I mean, that's a good summary, really, of the legal work going on all around the world. I don't feel it's necessarily a solution, but it is a movement in the right direction for making it very clear that these kind of services are not ones we want to operate there. The challenge, as with all of these sessions, are that there are so many areas that we could have picked up on. I've got lots of bullet points we just haven't had time to address, but the conversation has been so fascinating, both live and through the chat, and we can definitely see the same challenges arriving internationally as well, even as new countries that haven't been addressing this perhaps end up slightly further down the chain of where they need to get to. Then there's information there they can learn from. But even the countries that are doing more still have a long way to go. So there is no solution. You can really feed in your own examples, your own subject specific research into this, your own experiences, help with the awareness raising, but also help with solutions. And on that note, the conference is not over. The conference has not yet really begun. This is on previews, and we have 3 really exciting days of presentations coming up, including quite a few sessions relating to contract cheating. So if you want to learn more, including the latest research findings, there'll be great ones for you to come and attend. So I'm involved with 2 sessions, working with 2 of my own students, one of whom is on the call here today joining us, and we're going to be talking about some of the work we've been doing on contract cheating, collecting data, and investigating some of the emerging trends. So do join us for those. It will be great to have you there and to share more of that. But any of the other panel members, have you got any sessions coming up that you would recommend, or any other work that you're involved with there? Should we go back to our initial order again there, which is Irene to Deirdre? Yeah.
Well, we've got another pre-conference session coming up in half an hour on predatory publishing, which you might be interested in. So if you want to kind of have a little break and then come back to that one. But I was involved. Some of you will know in the audience, and certainly the panel. I was involved in coordinating all the reviews for all the contributions to the conference. So I can assure you it's an extremely rich picture, and I only wish I could attend every single session, because there are some fascinating ones. We've got people from parts of the world where we've not had people before, and I can see there was a gentleman, I think from Nepal, I think it was a gentleman, it might be a lady from Nepal in the audience earlier. I saw that, who I think has got a paper for us. So there are, it's great to have people from different parts of the world that we've not seen before, but there are some real treats coming up in the next 3 days. So, so if you haven't signed up, it's not too late. Please join us, and I hope you enjoy it. So over to Zeenath.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely. The NI is usually a fantastic place to listen to people and what they're researching. My first experience was 2018, and I think I echo what Rodika said today. That was my first time attending an academic integrity conference, and I couldn't believe how lonely I felt all those years working on this topic. And there's so many people worldwide who are in the same boat. So it feels wonderful to be a part of the conference and to be attending and to listen to everybody and to give my 2 pieces and have somebody listen to me. So please do, of course, attend the conferences. I do myself have 2 papers on contract cheating, which is going to be on Thursday, 10th June, back to back. Sonja, thank you so much for that convenience. One is at 11 CET and one is at 11:25. One looks at teachers, pre-service teachers, and one looks at contract cheating from a social lens. Sonja?
Well, I would like to have this opportunity just to tell you that we have 3 fantastic keynotes. The first one is Guy Curtis, Evolving an Understanding of Academic Integrity. Erika Löfström is going to talk on Thursday about supervision as an arena for teaching and learning academic integrity and research ethics. And of course, we touched upon COVID-19 and online education. And on Friday, we have Sarah Eaton just before the closing ceremony, and she'll have a keynote on communities of integrity engaging ethically online for teaching, learning, and research. Besides that, we also have 3 very interesting panels that I'm certain are going to touch upon contract cheating as well. One of them is student involvement in building culture of academic integrity. The second panel on Thursday is academic integrity in secondary education. And last but not least, we'll have a panel on academic integrity and text matching software tools. So please join us. You're very welcome. There's still time to register, and it's going to be a lovely conference. I hope so, at least. Thank you.
Yeah, and Deirdre?
I have nothing to add. That very comprehensive list that Sonja's just given you there. So I can see in the chat that somebody has posted a link. There isn't a further contribution from me or from QQI at the conference, although I will be attending and looking forward to hearing some of those sessions. But we'll be at the summer school later this month.
Yeah, and I see the question in the chat. Then this week we have the conference running tomorrow through Friday. Thomas has posted a link if you still need to register and give your credit card details over. I'm told they are secure and they're not there to blackmail you, unlike many contract cheating firms. And then many of you I know as well are registered next week for the NAI Summer School, which is going to be quite an intense few days of really interesting sessions with many of the top academic integrity researchers and practitioners in the world involved with that. So do join those. And I'll also give a shout out to Olu, who's posted in the chat about his session on detecting contract cheating. I've seen this presented before. He's also a member of the London and South East England academic integrity group as well, and he's doing some great work about how you pick up on the different clues that show you that something might have been written by a contract cheating service rather than the student. So we couldn't get onto that area today because there's so much we could have looked at, but that is going to come up during the conference as well. So I really think it is almost like a greatest hits conference that you can join from home. You don't even need to go and travel. So I hope to see so many of you there. But at this point, thank you very much to the panel for raising so much awareness. Thank you for all the tweets on Twitter for getting this information out to a wider audience. The video will be available to rewatch again as well and to pick up, and hope you're able to continue to develop the policies in your own institution and to make some progress towards addressing contract cheating.